Hey everybody, welcome to Culinary Characters Unlocked. I'm David Page. My guest on this episode, a renowned James Beard award-winning chef who's considered to be the dean of the Atlanta food scene, with an empire topped by her restaurant Bacchanalia and supplied to a great extent from her own farm. Here's my conversation with Chef Anne Quatrano. Chef, how are you? Thank you for joining me.
I'm great. Thanks for asking.
You're welcome. How are things in Atlanta?
Hot. Very hot. It was in the 90s.
You know what? Even before we were all upset about global warming, I lived in Atlanta in the 80s, I guess, and it was hot then. So stay inside and have a sweet tea. Let me go back to the very beginning of your story. What's your first cooking or even kitchen memory?
Probably my grandmother, my father's mom, really liked to cook. My mom didn't. And so we spent a lot of time with her, and she loved Gourmet magazine, had some compiled cookbooks based on magazine recipes, and she would use that religiously, and we'd cook from it, and her food was delicious.
What kinds of foods?
You know, all kinds. I mean, she did certainly try, Italian because of my grandfather from Italy, but also roast beef with Yorkshire pudding or angel food cake. She had a very extensive repertoire and kind of a fearless cook, and a very good one.
When did you realize you wanted to do this?
I cooked a lot when I was young. Even as a kid, my mom didn't really like to. So we wanted to do something different. I would end up doing it. We ate a lot of Captain Crunch and Pop-Tarts. Yes. Wasn't very elaborate. But then as I went to college, I cooked a lot with my roommate. Not professionally, really, until my late 20s. I had always worked in restaurants, but then kind of started cooking as well.
And you eventually went to culinary school?
Yeah. I'd been in the restaurant business, but really just in the front of the house. Hostess, server. Every once in a while, I'd help out in the kitchen. Manager. But it wasn't until 1985 that I decided to go to culinary school. And I moved out to San Francisco and went there at the Culinary Academy.
You grew up in Connecticut.
Yep.
You spent a fair amount of time on your grandmother's farm in Georgia. Why'd you go to culinary school on the West Coast?
I think I just always wanted to live in San Francisco. And, in the 80s, San Francisco was a very matriarchal culinary scene. There was all these great female chefs, and not so on the East Coast. And I love the idea of the farm to table. That was kind of exploding.
So you go to San Francisco, you go to culinary school, and your life changes in more than one way. You want to fill me in?
Yeah, it was, I'd say that I was the poorest I've ever been. I always say that. I lived on people's couches, just friends' couches, saved my money. I worked in all kinds of weird restaurants, but I really, really wanted to work at Zuni Cafe. I wanted to work for Judy Rogers. And I didn't really have aspirations of working in the back of the house. I wanted to work in the front of the house, but I wanted to get to know that food. So in 1985, they got a great review, and I just kept going there. I think I had 5 interviews there and eventually got hired as a server, which was fantastic. So I went to school by day and I worked at Zuni Cafe at night. And eventually Judy Rogers really didn't like taking on apprentices or culinary externs, but she eventually let me come on Mondays. And on Mondays, it was just the sous chefs and her. And we did the things like filleting, 50 pounds of anchovies and salting them or making all the pickles. So we did all these kind of great projects that were, I think, eye-opening, is how good something like a fresh anchovy can be as opposed to what you buy in a can.
You are quoted saying of California cooking, at least at the time, that it was flowing and soft and very approachable.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Well, the food flowed into the kitchen from the farmers, and it was very spur of the moment. You would get some squid that you weren't expecting, and all of a sudden you're figuring out how squid's going to go on that menu. I think Judy was she was a very tactile chef. Everything was lovely. It was lovely to touch. It was lovely to taste. It looked beautiful on the plate, and it was super simple. And I think that has been something that I've taken with me through the years. It was a great experience. I feel very fortunate. As I said, I don't know anybody else who apprenticed in her kitchen. So even though I worked on the floor most nights, I still had that experience to remember, both her and Zuni and San Francisco Bay.
What do you mean about food being simple? Because when you say that to some people, it means, well, the chef didn't do a whole lot. To others, it means the chef was smart enough not to do more than the food needed. How do you define it? What's a simple dish?
Well, when I think back there, a simple dish might be her Caesar salad, right? Which is iconic, or roast chicken. I mean, all of her meats were salted and let to air dry a little bit, and then perfectly roasted and served with this broth made from roasted bones and bread salad. And yeah, you didn't really need to do much more than that. And she purchased the best chickens you could find, chickens that are hard to find and most home cooks don't have access to, or at least not back then. I think that you are exactly right. I feel like there's an art to stopping, when to stop what you do to a dish. And even to this day, and I know food and restaurant chefs have evolved quite a bit since 1985. And for a while there, the more you did, the more important you were to your food in the days of Il Bulli. But I still feel like the more inexperienced chefs tend to overdo things that really should be left alone. We have some things that we think about a lot when we put together dishes with our staff, and it's how many flavors are on the plate, what's necessary on the plate. If a garnish isn't part of the flavor profile, then it's not necessary on the plate.
There goes your parsley consumption.
Right. I love the way parsley tastes personally, but yeah, so parsley's not on everything. Chives are not on everything, but yeah. I mean, I still like the food to be pretty. I want it to be purposeful. If we're going to put it on there, it's going to be part of that flavor. And we look a lot at all of the mouth feel. And if there's something that gives texture, it could be a radish, or it could be the stems of Swiss chard, or it could be a chip of some sort, but we like texture too. So we want it to both have some texture, some salt, some acid, a little bit of bitter, a little umami. We want the whole picture. Sweet, a little sweet.
So you learned professional cooking at cooking school. You also met your future husband.
Yeah, I met him at cooking school. And we weren't in the beginning, it wasn't like, this is it for life. That wasn't the way it was looking. But we had very similar goals. And then we just kind of hung together. We ended up moving back east, and we worked on Nantucket for a summer. Then we both moved to New York. We worked in New York together, and then moved down south. So it evolved. And I think it was much more professional at first, but yeah, now it's been, it's going to be 40 years, I guess, pretty soon. So yes.
So apparently the collaboration worked.
Yeah, it did work. Yeah. I mean, there was a time when we started opening other restaurants, and that was mostly to kind of get out of each other's faces. Yeah. And living and working together is not always easy, but I think that we had a good partnership. We still do. Yeah. And now he mostly farms. So, which is a great partnership because, yeah, we have somebody we can count on to produce the vegetables and eggs and everything that we use.
Well, you moved to Georgia and you opened up Bacchanalia, which is an extraordinary restaurant. It's been called Atlanta's fine dining bastion.
Wow.
How'd you figure that one out?
When we came to Atlanta, even just to see if this was going to be a place that we could cook. I mean, we were mostly coming because we knew we had this property. We could live on this property. We could farm, which we wanted to do.
This property being...
my mom's property. My family's property, yeah.
Named Summerland,
yeah. And it's 60 acres. It's 45 miles northwest of Atlanta. It's kind of a lovely property. It wasn't when we came down. But what we did was we ate. We came down, stayed in a motel, ate at restaurants here and we're like, yeah, I think we can cook this well, right? That's what we thought. We can cook as well as the restaurants here, as well as the chefs are here. And that was kind of our impetus to move. At the time, Clifford also had a horse that we kept in Manhattan and then on Long Island, and he was enamored by that, of course. And yeah, it was we wanted the farm, we wanted a restaurant, and we really had aspirations of opening a quaint little restaurant that was very seasonal in a little house that had 50 seats, didn't have valet parking, a little bucking the system a little bit. In Atlanta, everything was big and valet and yeah. So it was different. I mean, we've always cooked with our heart, with passion. I think we've always had really a lot of respect for ingredients and procuring the best. And we've never had partners, which has been awesome because we really only answer to ourselves on how we spend money. So we don't have to there's not a percentage that goes to somebody else. And if we want to buy something that costs more, we buy something that costs more. And if we want to pay our staff a little bit more, we pay our staff a little bit more, which has been very freeing. And I think really why in the beginning we wanted a restaurant of our own, because we'd been working for people for a long time that had different ideas about food that weren't our ideas. Like these crazy things that were happening in the 80s in New York, right? An a pasta with vodka sauce. And we're like, nah, that doesn't fit on the menu.
So what does fit on the menu?
Now?
Yeah.
For us, I think things that we find delicious. Roast chicken with some roasted tomatoes. I mean, the menu's not really extravagant. It's, I think, approachable. I think there are some items that we sell a lot of caviar, which is nice.
You don't raise that on your farm?
No, no.
Where do you get your caviar?
We get it from Regis Ova in California, Thomas Keller's. Yeah. I think it's the most consistent, the best that we've been able to find. If we can't raise it and it's not local from around here, because we sell, lobster from Maine, we like it to be domestic. So we work hard on that as well. We're not 100-mile radius rural buyer, but there's some delicious things that come from other places. But we do try to raise what we can.
How many of your ingredients do you raise on your own farm?
Well, eggs always. We have about 300 hens, so all of our eggs are from our farm. We've tried the dairy situation, and it was just too much work. Like milking cows twice a day and running restaurants was not fitting into the schedule. I like to multitask, but that didn't really work. So, and no protein. So really it's produce. And we raise what we can at the time so we can. Right now we're just harvesting all of our onions. We have lots of fruit, lots of berries, blackberries and strawberries. We have apples.
Okay, so if I come to Bacchanalia tonight, based on the fact that you're raising onions, you're raising berries, what do I get? Onions and berries together or what?
Oh, no. We also have tomatoes and leeks. And we're just getting into some of the summer fruit. We have a lot of little tomatoes, but melons are coming up. So really, we do a little bit of everything. It's a very diverse garden. And we have herb bins that we pick all our garnishes from alongside of the restaurant. So we do that trimming and picking at night. But yeah, I mean, some stone fruit that we're bringing in, soon figs.
Okay, what are you going to do with the figs?
With the figs, we often roast them with foie gras. That seems to be a real natural. Usually they get on a cheese course somehow as well. We offer 6 cheese options.
Well, you were among the first to really champion Georgia cheesemakers. I frankly hadn't thought about it. It never occurred to me there's a big Georgia cheese industry.
Well, it's not huge, but we've got one, yeah.
What are you getting from your local cheesemakers?
We have the cheeses from Thomasville. We have we get local butter from, they call themselves Banner butter, but they bring in butter from local cows. We get whole milk from a farm in Noonan that we make our ricotta from. Yeah, there's 3 or 4 good cheesemakers. There's some, I mean, the South certainly has their share. More goat. I think the goats are more acclimated to our climate than cows, really. It's kind of hot down here. But yeah, so there's a lot of goat milk in the South.
Since you're choosing from what's available today, how often does your menu change?
We print it every day, but It doesn't change. We never like sit down and say, the whole menu is changing today. I've never found that to be a very good method of bringing in new dishes. So we kind of change it slowly. Like today, we got in from the growers a lot of stone fruit. So we're changing a salad to just an assortment of stone fruit. So it kind of evolves as it goes. And it's mostly, the evolution is almost always produce driven, which I find to be refreshing, kind of. I mean, certainly we don't do East Coast halibut anytime but the season, which is kind of right now. Or we don't do Nantucket Bay scallops except for the short season. But besides that, most of the proteins are more stable and the produce is what comes and goes.
What are some representative dishes? What are some of your favorite dishes that you are routinely putting on the menu?
When I think of my favorite dishes, I think of dishes that hit all those points in the taste profile that I find to be so important. We feed all kinds of people here, right? Some are educated gourmands and some are people out for a great birthday dinner. And I like to think that they are experiencing something that they find interesting but approachable and delicious. And I often think of, when I think of delicious food, I often think of some of our Thai or Vietnamese. I feel like a lot of the cultural food has this formula that is so, or a sauce or a mother sauce that is so approachable and everybody loves. It's got the sweet and it's got bitter and it's got a little sour, sometimes a little spice.
Well, pardon me while I go get a banh mi.
And always salty. And then it has some fat component that brings it all together. So if you were to ask me some of my favorite dishes, we make a little date cake that's basically just dates, a little bit of honey. And we serve it with a really nice Parmesan, usually a Vache Ross or a red cow. And we make like a Parmesan tuile and a shaved Parmesan. And we make black garlic and put a couple of drops of black garlic on there and just the whole thing together. And it's a cheese course, but I think it's an exquisite taste, like all together, that almost everybody is like, oh, wow, that's really good. And I think everything together is complementing each other. So it's got that complete mouthfeel that's, I sometimes think like we used to travel a lot and cook all over the place. And I'd always, at the end, I'd be like, what's the best bite you put in your mouth? Because we would bring chefs with us because we want them to experience this, right? And it always came down to something really stupid and simple. And often it was what we brought because, because that's how we feel. Like, I mean, sometimes it could be like a really unctuous triple creme with a little crouton of sourdough and a honeycomb or something. And it's like, and in your mouth, it just explodes, right? Those are the kind of things that I think of as my favorite bites.
Well, what's your death row meal?
Well, I do love pizza, but no. I mean, I'm kind of, I would say just growing up where I did and with who I did, that red sauce or red gravy is my go-to comfort food. So I might do some ravioli or something, or pizza. I mean, really, I think there's a lot of things that I think are fantastic, but I might go for comfort. If I was going away forever, I'd say I might go for comfort.
Well, food is so intertwined with comfort anyway, in terms of, you smell something that smells like your grandmother used to make, and suddenly you're 8 years old again.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You've been called the Grande Dame of the farm-to-table movement, certainly in the Southeast. Is that accurate? You didn't invent farm-to-table.
No. I'll say this, that when Clifford and I moved here, we had one place that we bought local produce from, and all they really sold was salad greens, and they were nice. And then they eventually kind of went to just microgreens when that came popular. And there was not one other place we could buy anything locally from. So we grew a lot. And as people became available to us and produce became available, we bought it, and we bought all that we could. We just really supported them, which I feel like is, if you love something or want to support something, I feel like every person in the world can do this so simply just by intentional buying. Spend money on things that you believe in. Go to small restaurants, go to privately owned places, buy your produce from the farm stand down the street.
I read an interview where you said you were a fan of the chain restaurant Houston's. How are you sending people to chain restaurants?
I only like one thing at Houston's.
What?
I think they grill a mean artichoke. And honestly, I don't know, it's not even from the South, but I feel like when they have grilled artichokes, it's something that, and nobody does artichokes down here, and that was something we grew up with, the old fashioned kind that were steamed and then stuffed with breadcrumbs. And it was all kind of soggy and you just ate the leaves and whatever. But I do really, really love their grilled artichoke.
But to my mind, anyway, the chain restaurant, yes, it's convenient. Yes, it's predictable. A while back, it wasn't that expensive. I feel like chain restaurants have decimated the locally owned mom and pop that serves real food. And I'll wave my arms saying, don't go to chain restaurants. The public loves chain restaurants.
Well, they love convenience, yes.
You have places in your portfolio that aim at the convenience fan, do you not?
Yeah, I have my market that sells sandwiches, yeah. But you can't drive up and there's a window. You can't drive up and get it from a window. And, we make everything ourselves, including our bread. So, but I think a lot of chain restaurants appeal to people because of convenience. Like, I really am trying to think of a way to make an incredible chicken dinner that you can drive up to a window and pick up. That would be my concession to. When we were in New York, there was a place across the street from us called Chirpin' Chicken. Do you remember that?
Vaguely.
I don't know if it was Greek or Middle Eastern, but they would spatchcock chicken and it was lemony and garlicky and just grill it flat and serve it with some pita. I mean, it was awesome. So I think a lot about a Chirpin' Chicken eventually. I think that some kind of convenient chicken dinner would be fantastic. But so we have a fish camp, which we sell lobster rolls and fish.
Define fish camp for those who didn't grow up in the South or Wisconsin.
Well, I think of the fish camp of being a little New England also.
Okay.
But down here, I think they're considered, I don't know, I like the name, so we call it a fish camp.
So what do I get at your fish camp?
Our biggest sellers are shrimp po' boys, oyster po' boys. Lobster rolls are very popular, and we make a fish sandwich, fried fish sandwich. Those are our biggies.
I assume shrimp is local, Georgia.
Shrimp is from the Gulf, yeah. And sometimes Savannah. It depends on the season. Savannah or the Gulf.
Oysters, local?
Oysters, we do some East Coast, Northeast. We do sometimes one California, and then we do Florida and Alabama.
What do young chefs need to know?
That's a good one. I mean, when I think of our young chefs, which most of them are, I think they need to know what we talked about earlier, some restraint. I think they need to consider their audience as their bosses
Well, it's about pleasing people, isn't it?
I think that you have to have that. I have all these things that I look at when I interview people. And one of them is pushing in the chair after the interview, because I feel like you have to have some hospitality in you, or you need to understand that other people are important. And I like team players. I think this is a team sport and you cannot do it alone, no matter who you are.
It's hard to teach that stuff, isn't it? It's either innate or it's not.
Yeah, sometimes we hire people that have very little experience, but check off all those other boxes, which is so important. But feeding people is something that you have to feel, I think, all the way through. You have to have that generous spirit where you want to feed people, and you can't cook with your ego or what you like. You have to always think, this is what I like, and will this be approachable to the public?
Well, I used to say to be a successful chef, you really have to want to make people happy. Mm-hmm. But more and more, I think there are people entering the business because they want to be TV stars.
Sure.
I think that's terrible.
I think that is what it is. It's entertainment, right? And I do think that, well, let me just say this. I don't think those people are coming to work for me, because that's never been a goal of mine. I think the people who come to work for us used to work for us because they wanted to open their own restaurant. And they're like, this is a small group. This is how they do it. I want to be that person. I want to open a restaurant. Now, maybe they come here because they want to write it on their resume. I don't know. There's different reasons. But I do think that people who want to be a TV star probably would go to another type of restaurant than ours.
What do you think the state of American dining is? I mean, on the one hand, there's all this talk about organic and natural, and People are buying drinks that are probiotic, and yet, despite alarm bells that ring from time to time in the trade press, McDonald's seems to be doing fine. What do Americans really want?
I think about that a lot because we have a lot of young people who work for us. And, some of them are so into food, even the people who aren't in our kitchens, right? I mean, they're so into food. And others just eat like crackers and processed food. There's like a real split in what they're looking for. I feel like if you care about food, you probably do look for the organic or the what's at the farmer's market or the dairy, because who knows what is going into that food, honestly. Processed food, I feel like you have no idea or control over what's in it or what it's going to do to you. And I think that's evident by all the crazy diseases that people have now.
I would take it then you're not a huge fan of plant-based meat?
No, I hate it. We tried it at first when Impossible came into the market. And honestly, and this is so odd, but I could not stand the way it smelt when it cooked. I couldn't stand it. I said, nope, we're not doing this. I mean, we tried it for a couple weeks and I was like, no. I don't mind making something with black beans and beets if somebody doesn't want, or a falafel makes a great burger. And I know everything that goes into it. I just found those plant-based meats to be kind of frightening. I mean, if the smell of it cooking is so acerbic that I couldn't stand to be in the kitchen when I was cooking, I was like, how can I serve that?
Do you see that petering out? Do you see that as just a fad that's going to end? I mean, there's all this talk, we got to get rid of cows because of methane. You own a farm. How serious do you consider this?
I think that there's all kinds of people that don't eat meat, right? For all different reasons. And some of them, that is a fine substitute and they will continue to eat it. But I don't necessarily think that they're the ones that think that it's healthy or not eating meat for health reasons. They're not eating meat for other reasons. Yeah, I can't even imagine. And like this meat that's made in a test tube, it's just kind of scary to me.
Lab-grown meat, yes.
It just frightens me. I think that if you want to be a vegetarian, then like vegetables, right? I mean, that's it. If you want to be a pescatarian, then love seafood. And yeah, but unfortunately, I don't dictate that for most people. So,
do you see any trends developing in American dining?
Honestly, you see like a lot of vegetable trends. I saw somebody a quote recently. Are we expecting too much from cauliflower? Yeah, are we asking too much from cauliflower? It's like, yes. Or cabbage, or yeah. I mean, I think you see those like where they're just going crazy places with the, so there's that. But none of the trends to me, I mean, we don't follow them so much in our menu. I mean, every once in a while I'll see something I say, that looks awesome. Let's try that on Instagram or whatever. But as far as like a broad scale trend, no. And I think that we are seeing maybe the whole vegetarian, pescatarian, and even some of the gluten-free maybe just not as relevant as it used to be or not as widespread. I think you use like organic flour and you culture it and you let it ferment. I mean, our breads are awesome. And I think that most people realize that and splurge on them even when they're gluten-free.
Real bread is such an eye-opener.
Yeah.
I declare Zingerman's in Ann Arbor, Michigan to be the best pastrami sandwich on earth, better than Katz's, because Zingerman's makes their own bread.
Yeah.
Katz's has acknowledged buying less than great bread for price point.
Mm-hmm.
So people talk a good game about wanting to eat well and wanting to eat real food and wanting to eat healthy. How can home cooks achieve that?
Again, I think they can achieve it pretty easily by buying food intentionally, spending money on food at farmers markets, which got even more reasonable than the supermarket. Or during COVID, we saw, you could eat cheaper if you bought locally than having things trucked in, and not to mention the expense of trucking them still, which is very high, but also the expense of the quality of the product and the freshness. I don't think it's hard to eat at home. And honestly, I cook a lot at home now. My 87-year-old mom lives on the property in her house and I prepare her food. So I cook almost every night at home for her, and she likes simple food, nothing elaborate. it's not hard really to cook that. I think it, sometimes is a little time consuming, but not hard. And I think so many people have championed that, right? I mean, when I think of people, Ina Garten, I mean, her food is delicious and it's simple. I mean, it's nothing. Or back when I was a kid, the Silver Palette cookbooks, I still make a dish out of that chicken with the prunes and the olives. It's delicious. And I remember, I mean, they were also champions for home cooks for many generations.
It cracks me up when I see people ordering these food preparation kits where the big advantage seems to be that the pepper came in a plastic thing you had to rip open.
Yeah.
Get a chicken, put some salt and pepper on it, put it in the oven, take it out.
Right.
Do you think we're getting any better as a culture about food? Are we broadening the envelope? Does that matter at all? Should we be looking to be more adventurous, or should we just be giving people what they know they like?
That's a good question. I think it would be nice if people got back to basics a bit. Yeah. And I shouldn't even say, because I love my industry. I love people who cook. I love restaurants. I love small restaurants. I love the people who cook in them and the chefs. I can't think of a more generous or authentic industry to be involved in. So yes, I think that if there's a mom and pop Thai restaurant down the street, eat there. Or if there's a Salvatorian place that's making these great pampusas, eat there. Like, I think all of that is really important. And it's also important to understand people's culture and how they eat. But also, I think you should eat at home. I think there should be a nice blend of what you do and how you eat. And you know what? If you think you can make that Thai food at home, and you probably can, try it. Buy 10 ingredients and make it at home. I mean, Indian food, I think, is different. You have to buy 30 ingredients to make it at home, right? But Thai food, Vietnamese food, Korean food, it's like 10 ingredients will get you any of that. And I think that makes eating kind of adventuresome at home.
What's coming up for you in the future? More of the same? You're going to retire? You're going to open a new restaurant? What are you looking at?
No, I'm not going to retire. And I do think a lot about what I talked to you about is a drive-through chicken dinner, maybe like Chirpin' Chicken, but maybe with a little southern sides or something. But I think about that a lot. I just am ready to sign a lease on a space really close to Bacchanalia. The gentleman is taking an old chicken processing plant. He's a landlord that I've dealt with before. It's huge. And he's making it into a indoor year-round farmers market where he's leasing out the stalls for $30 a day to farmers. And since it has so many, it has a huge walk-in coolers. If you take your $30 a day, 20 by 20 space, you also get that same space in their cooler, which I think would be really important to farmers to have a place where they can keep either their CSA or whatever they're doing and not have to schlep their, I mean, I love farmers markets and we sell bread at them. And I'm not saying that I don't support them, but sometimes the heat is ridiculous. Sometimes it's freezing. Sometimes it's raining. But to be able to go somewhere and get all of that year round sounds incredible to me. So we're taking space and we're going to move our bread baking there. So it'll be a bakery and a restaurant. And the restaurant, I'm very, very happy to be trying this for the first time, but I want it to be kind of upscale dining, but just breakfast and lunch, closed at dinner. And I'm hoping that will help a lot of, especially women who want to be in our industry, but really can't deal with the fine dining hours and have a family. So I'm excited about that. That would be in fall of 2025.
Okay, and when you open up and I come visit, what's an upscale breakfast?
I'm thinking Oliver Breakfast. Okay, I have a favorite restaurant. It's in LA, Destroyer. Have you ever been there?
No, I don't know it.
You should go there, really.
Okay.
Everything's kind of in a bowl and it's built up in that bowl, which is lovely because you go through layers of flavor and texture. But yeah, so I think our breakfasts will be in these bowls. And I'm not saying it won't be eggs and bacon, but it might be eggs and bacon and then some kind of a pickled green and then maybe some kind of a fresh green. But a bowl of something delicious that may not be fat-free, but might be just really good. And it might have some breadcrumbs or some bread on it. Yay. But yeah, so that's what I'm thinking. And it'll be a menu that goes straight through breakfast and lunch and close at like 4.
I'm coming for that.
Okay. I mean, I'm mostly excited to help get this farmer's market off the ground, which I think is a fantastic idea. We don't have anything like it here. No indoor. One of the main vendors is going to be Do you know Will Harris from White Oak Pastures?
I don't.
So Will is like one of those. He has grass-fed beef and chicken and pork. He took a family farm that was commodity proteins, and he has, over the past 50 years, made it into this like incredible organic and free range protein producer. And he recently, over COVID, went to just business to consumer. So he doesn't really do business to business anymore. So I think it'll be great for the consumers to have the access to this. And he's in Georgia. He's in South Georgia. Yeah. So I'm excited to support him also in his efforts with his daughter and family.
You've supported a lot of people over the years, including a number of chefs who trained under you. You ever sit back and think about legacy?
A little bit. I mean, I have no kids. I mean, I love my dogs, but I don't think they're my legacy. But no, I do. I mean, I'm so proud of so many of them and in contact with them. And really, I think when you asked me about the Grande Dame of the farm to table, I think mostly, besides putting our money into these local farmers, that we have taught generations of chefs at this point the importance of buying that way. And they do. So I think, yes, that has spiraled. And I find that to be an incredible legacy. Sure.
And the accolades are well deserved.
Well, thanks.
Chef, a real pleasure talking with you. It's been an absolute delight.
It was a pleasure, David. Thanks for asking me.
The fabulous Anne Quatrano on Culinary Characters Unlocked. I'm David Page, and I'll see you next time.